All right, great. So I know people are still coming in, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. For those who may not know me, my name's Colby Sledge. I'm the council member for District 17. This is our second public meeting on the Wedgewood-Houston Chestnut Hill UDO and zone changes. Here with me are several members of the planning department that you'll be hearing over the course of the presentation and then during the Q&A session. Those are Joni Williams, Harriet Jameson Brooks, and Greg Claxton. So you'll hear me turn it over to Harriet just for a minute to walk through kind of what our agenda is and how we'll go. As people come in, and if you attended the last meeting, I know there was some questions about getting people, like making sure people could see each other's names and see questions. So we've tried to work with ITS on that. I don't know that we got all the way there, but we are going to make sure that we read out the names of the people who asked the questions and make sure that everybody knows. And again, this one is also being recorded just like the last one was. And it'll be up on the Metro 3 YouTube account, which is all you do is just go to youtube.com and you can search Metro Nashville 3. It'll pop up immediately. And then it'll also be hosted on the study plan page, which has every single document regarding UDO, zone change, the study plan where this was born from. The quickest way to get to that is whchstudy.nashville.gov. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harriet with the planning department, and she'll walk through kind of what our outline is going to be. And there will be some pretty significant changes throughout. So if people have questions, please make sure that you kind of get those questions in your mind, because we will go back into that Q&A session once we're done with the presentation. It looks like actually first we'll go to Greg Claxton with planning. Greg has worked on basically sort of the genesis of not only this plan, but really the entire comprehensive planning update, which many of you may be familiar with, called Nashville Next. So Greg's going to talk a little bit about what these two neighborhoods' roles are in Nashville Next and kind of how we got there from here. So Greg, are you there?
I am.
Great. All right.
All right, Harriet, you want to pass the ball over to me, and I can share my screen. All right.
It should be passing.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the planning study that was adopted in 2019 for Wedgewood-Houston and Chestnut Hill, that recommended creation of the UDO that is the main focus of tonight's meeting. And I want to put it in context of the recent planning work that the department's done, kind of as we've been engaging the people throughout Nashville over the last 10 years or so. And I want to start with the general plan that Councilman Sledge mentioned, Nashville Next. This was the result of 3 years of work by the planning department engaging tens of thousands of Nashvillians on the subject of how they want to see, how people in Nashville want to see Nashville grow and change, and where not to grow and change over the next 20, 25, 30 years. It is an extremely extensive document. It kind of goes into a lot of different aspects of quality of life and how Nashville is changing and kind of people's hopes for the future. But for our purposes tonight, kind of the best summary is what we call the growth and preservation concept map. That's the map on the screen here. It lays out kind of what we heard from the public in terms of preserving rural areas, preserving natural areas, wanting to maintain and improve kind of the core neighborhoods in both Nashville's urban areas as well as suburban areas. And then how Nashvillians kind of wanted to think about growth and change, and where they wanted to improve through growth. And the framework for that is what we call centers and corridors. These are the various shades of orange splotches on this map, as well as the blue lines that connect them. And the idea here is that we want communities throughout Nashville to be anchored by kind of these mixed income, mixed use, walkable areas where you could go and meet some of your daily needs or weekly needs, shopping, services, errands, see your neighbors while you're out, improve the transportation system for getting to work or getting to school, that kind of thing. So this is kind of the really big picture, very long term, 20, 25, 30-year view of how what we heard from Nashvillians, how they want to grow and change. A lot of this is kind of how we coordinate housing, kind of how we plan for where people live over the next 20 or 30 years, how that matches to those walkable areas, how that matches to how people get around. But a big part of it was using our corridors, using our centers, using kind of how you transition from the corridor, the center into the neighborhoods to create, what we think of as abundant housing. And is that we want to give people more options for finding a place that works for them, for how they want to live, and what where they can afford. Kind of that housing options is a key tool that we have. We're prohibited by the state from doing regulatory tools like rent control or something we had recommended called inclusionary housing, where we would require a portion be set of new development be set aside as affordable. That's not something we can do anymore. So this has become over the last couple of years an even more important strategy. One of the important ways that we think about this is what we call missing middle housing. The idea here is that, this is not unique to Nashville. In cities throughout the country, over the past 30, 40, 50 years, we've become very, very good at building large, dense housing, such as kind of big new apartment buildings downtown, or on corridors, or large apartment complexes in the suburbs. And we've become very good at building kind of single family and duplex neighborhoods. And we've kind of lost the habit of building the stuff in between. These may be small apartment buildings, townhomes, cottage courtyards, triplexes, accessory dwelling units, that kind of thing. It's a range of things, but it allows you to give people those increase in options in a way that fits the character a little bit more. A corridor, whether you're kind of stepping down from that corridor to create a graceful transition, or whether you're inside of a neighborhood. And so coming out of Nashville Next, thinking about kind of what these centers are going to be like, what these corridors are going to be like, and kind of how we meet the housing needs that Nashville has. One of the things we wanted to start up again was a small area planning program where we take a detailed look at a particular area. For a variety of reasons, including a grant from the National Endowments for the Arts that supported some community engagement through the We Home podcast, we landed on focusing on the center, that's the big orange area in the center here, for Wedgewood-Houston. And then because we wanted to look more comprehensively, we also included the other neighborhood areas of Wedgewood-Houston, as well as Chestnut Hill, so that we could get kind of a little bit larger area and think about kind of the many different through here. One of the things we knew about these two neighborhoods over the past 10 or 15, 20 years is that they'd done a lot of extensive planning. There'd been a lot of public engagement. And so as we were getting started, we wanted to respect that. We didn't want to come and say, all right, tell us what you want for the future. We wanted to come, and as we engaged people in these two neighborhoods, we wanted to say, here's what you've told us in the past, or here's what you've talked about in the past wanting for the future. We want to do a check on whether that's still relevant, and then see what's the next step that we can take. So that was the foundation for the public engagement that we did. We had a few different community meetings, as well as a week-long charrette, where we try to get people kind of working together who may not normally interact, and sort of talking through what they think about different parts of these two neighborhoods, how they should grow, how they should change, what should be preserved, and kind of what people want for the future. Out of that, we produced the plan study document. A big part of that is kind of how we think about the character of the different areas. So this map here is, I think you'll see it when Harriet's talking as well, is kind of our way of talking about the different characters of different parts of these two neighborhoods. because, one of the things we knew from looking at the prior plans and from our public engagement, because we knew kind of finding ways to add housing affordability or maintain housing affordability was a big element, a big concern. We had this chart which talks about kind of how each of the different areas in their own way supports that missing middle approach, finding new housing types that could come in at a lower price point. And so, three of the areas that got a lot of focus was kind of the pink area at the bottom, area 2, and then the red area for Chestnut Hill, 3A. Recognizing that these are neighborhood content, you want to design kind of those new housing types carefully. And so because of that, we recommended creation of what we at the time called a contextual infill urban design overlay, but basically the regulatory tool that we're talking about tonight. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Harriet to talk through kind of the feedback that we've gotten and where we're at with that tool.
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. That really laid a great framework for understanding how we got to where we are today. And I am going to share my PowerPoint again. So I just wanted to start off at the beginning for those of you who are joining us a little late. I wanted to note that our team has been working with ITS to try to accommodate comments and concerns about the virtual meeting platform, specifically how to make it more interactive by being able to see other attendees' names and who's asking questions. So I want to know that we have been working on that. We are, of course, limited, especially by bandwidth, prohibiting us from seeing everyone's videos. But if you are in the panelist window in WebEx and click on View All Attendees, you should be able to see the list of all of the attendees that are at today's meeting. And we'll also make sure that when we get to the Q&A tonight that we'll mention the name of the questioner before the question is asked. And we'll also tomorrow publish on the website all of the questions and who asked the questions. We may not have the answers yet when we post them tomorrow, but we'll also try to get that up there as soon as possible. So in the interest of time, most of my talk tonight will center around edits or changes that have been made since the December 21st meeting, rather than introducing the document again. If you're not familiar with the document, I would recommend that you take some time to download and read the draft or watch the YouTube video from the last meeting. As Councilman Sledge noted, you can do both of these at the web page for the site, which is WHCHstudy.nashville.gov. So since our last meeting on December 21st, we've received many comments and have had several very productive conversations. We're taking all of these comments seriously. We're reading all of the emails. And so I wanted to start by just noting 3 critical responses that we've made to the feedback from the beginning. So the first is in regards to timeline. At the January 21st Planning Commission meeting, the project will be deferred to the February 11th meeting. In addition, we have added another online community meeting on January 26th. So for all of those who have sent in comments about the timeline, at the January 21st Planning Commission meeting, we will be deferring it to a public hearing at the February 11th Planning Commission meeting. Secondly, we have updated the boundary of both the zone change and the UDO to remove the transition properties from the 2019 study. So a special significant concern were the areas kind of on the west side of Wedgewood-Houston and then the northwest side. And so we have updated the boundary to remove those transition properties and made some other tweaks to better align it with character areas 2A, 2B, and 3A from the 2019 study. And then Lastly, we have also updated the Merritt Southgate standards for height, setbacks, and impervious surface ratio. And I'll go over all of those in a few minutes. So these 3 items are not the only edits that we've made to the document, but I did want to mention them right from the outset, as they're the ones that we've received the most concerns and comments regarding. So then just to reiterate, as Greg mentioned, this UDO and zone change came out of 2 key issues or goals that were mentioned in the 2019 planning study. The first is the need for housing diversity and opportunities for resident stability in this really rapidly growing part of South Nashville. And then the second is to provide standards to encourage development that better reflects the unique character of the neighborhood and the diverse needs of residents. So as we talk about the UDO and the zone change as an implementation tool of the plan, these are the real key issues and goals from the plan that we are using as a basis for the creation of this zone change and as we're evaluating the standards within the UDO. So first, I'd like to talk about the zone changes. If you were at the previous meeting or have been able to look at the prior map, you will notice that the boundary has changed. Specifically, you'll see that we've taken out some of these parcels that were in the transition area, as I noted earlier. In addition, we've updated the language in the UDO to show that all residential properties within the UDO boundary, zoned RM20A and S, which is this yellow color, will be entitled to 2 units. So that matches the current R6 entitlement and may be entitled to additional dwelling units depending on the lot size at a factor of 20 units per acre. That's where the RM20 comes in. So this is an upzoning for residential properties, and we want to make that very clear. There are many substandard lots within the area that would not be able to currently build 2 units with the R6 zoning. But we are changing that language so that everyone can build at least 2 units. Additionally, I'd like to point out that greater density and diversity of housing types were an important part of the 2019 study. So this is a critical piece of that implementation. So next, I wanted to go into the feedback and updates that we've made regarding the geographic boundary. As I mentioned earlier, we've updated the boundary to correspond with character areas 2A, 2B, and 3A of the 2019 planning study. We've removed the industrial property south of Hart Street, and we've removed the transition properties in Wedgewood-Houston. Next, I'd like to go into the feedback and updates for the compliance and UDO standards sections of the document. If you happen to have the document in front of you, these are the changes we've made to pages 6 through 13. We've removed the UDO standard that said the parking area that accommodates 4 or more vehicles shall be separated from building facades a minimum of 8 feet. We've also moved the detached accessory dwelling unit standards and incorporated those into the building type standard section. And I'll say more on that in a few minutes. We've updated the character area standards. So this is page 14 through 17. So we have increased the impervious surface ratio standards by 0.1 in all subdistricts. And this helps provide some consistency with the with the zoning code. We've also edited the definition of adjacency to remove reference to properties across the street. I feel like that was causing a lot of confusion, and so now adjacency just refers to properties, residential properties on either side of a parcel. And then we've standardized the minimum side setbacks for single family and 2 family at 5 feet, which also matches the zoning code. Lastly, here are the standards that we've updated in the building type standards section. So that's pages 18 through 20. We have added a detached accessory dwelling unit building type because we were receiving lots of questions on that. We've also added a caveat that reduced parking may be available through the modification process. We've refined the language around the building type standards, both for clarity and to match kind of the local thinking or local Nashville parlance about DADUs and things like that. We've also removed several standards from the building type section. And so, for instance, we've removed height and max floors. Now those will live only in the character area standard section. We've removed the maximum number of dwelling units. That's determined by underlying zoning, so that was redundant. We have removed the standard for minimum rear setback. That was a question that we were receiving frequently. And then we've also removed the number of attached units for cottage courts. So I'd like to end my overview of the changes we've made to the document with a list of specific comments and their related responses and/or clarifications regarding the Merritt Southgate subdistrict. And I'm going to go through these comments and concerns one by one. In the end, most of these updates have made the standards more consistent with the existing zoning code. And we've also tried to take these concerns into account and provide appropriate responses and updates. So the first concern was that the impervious surface ratio limit for the UDO is far too restrictive for the Merritt Southgate subdistrict. ISR is already regulated by Metro, and adding an ISR to the UDO is redundant and should not be part of the UDO standard. And so in response to that, the current zoning for R6A currently allows a lot coverage of 0.50. So that's your current entitlement. We have updated the UDO and increased the ISR from 0.5 to 0.6 for single family and duplexes and 0.7 to multifamily. And then you'll also see that this, in addition to being an increase, the current entitlement also helps it align with the zoning code standards for RM20A and F. So the second concern that we've received is regarding height, and it said the proposed height limits in Merritt Southgate District should be adjusted to 35 feet for all housing types, no averaging down. And so what we have done here is we took a look at the zoning code, and we made the increased the maximum height to 3 stories for single family and 2 families. And then 3 stories for multifamily, but where a 4th story may be granted for flats or other multifamily projects through the modification process. And so these standards now are more consistent both with the 2019 planning study and also more consistent with what the zoning code allows. Third, stacking of units should not be a requirement for any housing type. For example, triplex should be able to have 2 ground floor units instead of forcing owners to walk up 1 to 2 flights of stairs to gain access to their home. So for this, we just added a clarification that stacking of units is not a requirement of the standards, and we've adjusted the language in the UDO to reflect that. And fourth, setbacks. The proposed side and rear setbacks in the Merritt Southgate District are too restrictive. Base zoning already regulates setbacks. Merritt Southgate does not need increased setback restrictions. And so in response to that, again, we took a look at the zoning code, and for RM20A and F, the minimum side setback is 5 feet. And so we have adjusted the side setback to 5 feet for single family and 2-family, and then 5 feet minimum for multifamily for some building types that are much greater in massing, and that also within the UDO require some aggregation or potential aggregation of properties or wider lot width. There is a larger setback standard than 5 feet, but that is the standard for single family and for duplexes. So 5-foot minimum setback matches the current zoning regulations, and we've removed the language for rear setback standards. So with that, that concludes my overview of the changes that we've made to the UDO document. And I just wanted to review in closing the timeline going forward for this. As we mentioned earlier, on January 21st, the UDO and the zone change will be deferred to the February 11th Planning Commission meeting. The Metro Council bill filing will take place on January 22nd. We will have another online community meeting on January 26th to discuss any further updates or changes to the draft. We'll have a Metro Council first reading on February 2nd. The Planning Commission meeting and public hearing, as well as pending legislation after that hearing, will begin February 11th. On March 2nd, we'll have the Metro Council second reading and public hearing. March 16th, the Metro Council third reading, and then the bill becomes effective on April 6th. And so I'd like to just take a quick note because we've received a lot of questions about pending legislation. That's a little confusing. Pending legislation happens after 2 things have occurred. 1, Planning Commission makes a recommendation, and the bill has completed its first reading at Metro Council. So as this schedule lays out, the Metro Council first reading will happen on February 2nd, and then the Planning Commission will make their recommendation on February 11th. At that point, no permits will be able to be issued that conflict with the standards of the UDO. So a permit would need to be issued, not just applied for, prior to that first reading at council and the Metro Planning Commission public hearing. And so that concludes my presentation, and I will hand it back over to the councilman for any further comments that he would like to make, and we can open it up to the Q&A as well.
Great. So thanks for that, Harriet and Greg. So the way we're going to do this, there's been some written questions in the Q&A box below. We're also going to see, I think we can go through those fairly quickly. I believe we've been working with ITS. I believe there is a way to raise your hand. There's a little hand that should be in the bottom right-hand corner of those. What we're attempting to see is if somebody raises it, then we can sort of unmute that person and have them ask their question and then go forward. So I want to see if people can do that while we run through very quickly sort of the first 8 or so. I'm going to have planning staff. It looks like, yeah, it does look like it's working because we have somebody who's raised their hand. So I'm going to run real quickly through the written Q&A boxes. I'm going to put the name of the person who asked it, read the question, and then either answer it, or if I can't answer it, I'll turn to one of the planning staff, confirm that answer, we'll get that answer. So first question was from Kyle Yates. Said, can you talk us through the proposed SP project at the corner of Merritt and Pillow and how it does or does not fit under all these new guidelines in the proposed UDO? In the boundary change, that proposed SP project at Merritt and Pillow is not in the proposed UDO any further. It was in that transition area. Second question from Kyle Yates, can planning provide the residents of Wedgewood-Houston a drawing of a typical 50 by 150 size lot, show us how 3 units could be built on the lot and also fulfill the new setback height and parking requirements? I'm going to turn to Harriet on this because I do believe the planning department's been working through some of those, and I think that if they don't have them right now, that's a possibility, but I want to confirm that with Harriet.
Yes, absolutely. We have, through this process, worked through several case studies with different size lots and various conditions, alley access, no alley access, that kind of thing, within the boundary, and can definitely provide drawings to show that on the website. I'll try to get those uploaded tomorrow, but we do have those.
Great. Thanks, Harriet.
Would be happy to provide them. And also, I'll just say, if anyone has questions about a specific property that you'd like for one of us to kind of walk through with you, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Perfect. Thanks. Next question was from Joshua Baxter. It said, explain number 2. That was put up when it was talking about the changes in boundaries. So again, reminder on the boundaries have been shifted. They've been reduced, quite frankly, to the boundaries of the subdivisions, of the sub-districts, excuse me, that were discussed in the study plan. What that means primarily is that transition area on Merritt was removed, as well as some properties on the edges that didn't fall in those sub-districts. They were primarily, they were primarily industrial or commercial properties. Number 4 was, and I'm going to encourage people to raise your hand, because as soon as I run through these, I can get you into the audio. I'm trying to get through these fairly quickly, and I'm going to go to the audio after the first 9 that came up, because then people started raising their hands. Aaron, sorry, Aaron, I'm not sure of your last name. I'm going to say Gauger, asked, why cap the single family home square footage? That feels counter to market demand and will depress overall dollar per square foot values of the area. Just 2 things on that. One, or as Harriet mentioned, square footage already does have caps within any zoning regarding the lot size that you can cover, the portion of the lot that you can cover. Harriet went over what that ISR increase has been. Also, just a reminder again, residential properties are upzoned in this zone change. So substandard lots are guaranteed at least 2 dwelling units, and then properties that were zoned for 1 or 2 family have the entitlements for more under this zoning change. Joshua Baxter asked, what is the height requirement for single family homes on Hamilton Avenue? Kyle Yates responded that 35 foot is just what she said, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to turn this to Harriet. Harriet, what is the height? It's not a requirement. I think what was meant to be asked was, what's the height maximum for single family homes on Hamilton Avenue in the Merritt Southgate subdistrict?
Right. It's 3 stories, which matches the zoning requirement.
Got it.
So there's not a specific footage. It's regulated in terms of stories for that instead of specific footage.
Yeah. There was a follow-up question to that, but I'm going to keep going in order. Scott Morton says, thank you. Can you please clarify the definition of measurement of height? It says refer to page 17 in the definition on page 12, but I don't see a page 17. Is the average natural grade at front property line the average of the 2 corners, or is there more? And the question cuts off there. So we're checking the pages right now. Again, I want to encourage them.
Yes. So I don't have the document directly in front of me. It is the average natural grade at the front property line, and that is a standard within the zoning code. But I'll have to double check if that means the average of the 2 corners, or exactly how they clarify that in the zoning code. But Scott, I can get back to you on that one. I'll write it down and be sure to contact you.
Great. Thanks, Harriet. We're getting to the last couple before I'm going to go over to the audio one. So ITS, just be ready for that. Kyle Frohock asked, please clarify the height limitations for single family homes in the Merritt Southgate area. The change to 3 stories does not designate a specific height. I think we just went over that part. But the question is, does that mean an accessory dwelling or primary dwelling can be built to any height? Question.
If I can chime in on this one. So I think, So there are, many people know that detached accessory dwelling units as a definition in the zoning code are permitted with conditions. And those conditions have some pretty detailed design standards. Where the UDO is silent on a particular standard, those conditions of that are already in the zoning code would apply. So if folks have feedback for us on how the detached accessory dwelling units are currently regulated and where we have tweaked or edited those standards, if there's feedback there, I think we're open to hearing those comments, and they are welcome to email the Wedgewood-Houston Chestnut Hill email address to talk about DADUs specifically. I know there's a lot going on there, and we'd be happy to talk about that building type more. And where we need to provide additional clarity, we can do that in the UDO document.
Great. Thanks, Joni. So next, what I'm going to do, this is the last one I had before we opened up for audio for hands. So I'm going to get this question answered. And then ITS, I'm going to ask you, the first person I saw with their hand up was Brian Knock. It's a little hard to see on my panel, but if you can check and see if that person's hand is still up and prepare to unmute them so then they can ask their question. So last question I had before the audio was from Joshua Baxter: will permits and process be grandfathered in due to delays with COVID? So I'll answer that one in the sense of, I think you saw on the last page regarding what pending legislation means. Harriet, if you can go back to that just so people can refer to it. If you have a permit that's in process, it will help if you send it to me so that I can look up the permit. Planning can look it up too, but this kind of falls more in my realm. So my email address is colby.sledge@nashville.gov. And please send me, if you've got the permit number, that's great. If not, at least the address that the permit that you have in question. And that way I can work through quicker, because that's a codes issue. It's not a planning issue. And I can work through faster on codes. All right, I'm going to see if Brian is unmuted. Brian, are you able to?
Brian didn't have their hand up any longer. They had taken it down.
I'm looking. Hey, Wesley, can you try again? Because I'm looking at his hand right now. Brian Knock, N-O-C-K.
Oh, looks like he put it back up.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, you should be unmuted.
Thanks, Colby. I had put it down. It was just to kind of confirm that you guys had that. But since I'm off mute, I'll say, thanks to the group for putting this together. For those who don't know me, I live in Chestnut Hill, and I'm the secretary of our neighborhood association, which is known as Trimble Action Group, or TAG. So appreciate these forums, and we will get a note out to our neighbors to let them know of the timeline shifts. Thanks all.
Thanks, Brian. Wesley, can you go to Kristen Heggie next? I see her hand up. Kristen, you should be unmuted.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay. I live in the Fall Hamilton area, and I guess the fundamental question I have is, most of the other areas now are less restricted.
Hey, Kristen, we started to lose you at less restricted there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you better.
Okay. In the Fall Hamilton area, it seems like that is becoming more restrictive based on, I own a single family home. It's 2 stories right now. So I couldn't add a 3rd story, but my neighbors could have 3 dwellings. And so I think I want to know a little bit more about someone who's owned their home for 7 years, wanting to make maybe appropriate renovations, not having the same opportunity to increase their home the same as others are increasing units on their land. And kind of the same token is, now my garage cannot face the street, even if it's in the back of my property, which would then mean I have to pave my entire backyard. So I think I just want to understand a little bit more about the Fall Hamilton.
Okay, great. Joni or Harriet, do y'all want to talk about the Paul Hamilton standards?
Sure. And the Fall Hamilton standards, that goes back to the 2019 study where the community engagement and the planning process, the recommendations were for that contextual infill UDO that Greg mentioned earlier. And the idea behind that was really that new development should be encouraged to be more in context with the existing neighborhood. Most of the properties in Fall Hamilton are still kind of pre-1970s intact, the smaller bungalows. We actually considered for a while the idea of putting it into a historic conservation overlay because it is so intact. But it seems like from the planning study, the best option would be to go ahead with the contextual infill overlay. And so, there are, if your property has specific circumstances, as you were mentioning with the garage, not allowed to face the street, although it's in the back of the property, if there are certain things like that where you would like us, to look into a modification, or where maybe the standards need to be tweaked, we'd be happy to still look at that. But the regulations or the recommendations for height standards specifically came out of the 2019 planning study.
Okay, I'll probably shoot you guys an email and kind of give you my property address and specifics on that.
Yes, please do. That would be great.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm going to go to one more person who has their hand up who I know didn't have a question. That's Dana Terabesi. And I'm going to go back into the written Q&A, take a few more of those, and then come back into the audio list. So, Dana, you should be unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Hi, I have similar questions to Kristen. I've owned my home since 2013, so almost 8 years. And my husband and I are considering doing a renovation. And as it is, I assume the 24-foot max height, the 30-foot rear setback, is it like gabled roof? Like there seem to be a lot of restrictions that, I understand like potentially most of that part of the neighborhood is intact. We don't have alleys, so we are kind of limited in what we can do based on what the other part of the neighborhood and Southgate have been able to do. But I feel like no offense, but they are older. I mean, there's nothing, I'm grateful we didn't go the historic overlay route, but I do feel like there are a lot of things you can do with design and that could be taller than 24 feet or a 30-foot rear setback. I mean, it's a 50 by 150 lot. So it's very restrictive, and I'd love to see what other options could be had there. Secondly, the timeline, the revised timeline doesn't look like it really changed. It just added an online community meeting. Is that the case, or am I missing something? I don't see a real delay there.
No, I can speak to that, Dan. So originally the Planning Commission, it was originally slated to go before the Planning Commission January 21st. That's now delayed to February 11th. So on that timeline, you see where it's deferred. So that's deferred back to February 11th. The first reading on council is still February 2nd. That is a perfunctory reading that just gets it in the filing system. I want to be clear to everyone, this is a zoning bill. Literally everything can be amended in this process. So filing it at council doesn't change anything as far as the UDO or the zone, as far as like what can be adjusted. What I will know is what's noted there on the pending legislation. Instead of the potential of pending legislation occurring on February 2nd, instead the potential for pending legislation is February 11th now. And we can talk through that more, but those are the major changes.
Great, and I'll speak to the other comments. Dana, so as I mentioned earlier, we've removed the standard for the 30-foot rear setback, so you won't have to worry about that anymore. And then, as I mentioned earlier with Kristen's comment, the height standards were something that came out of the 2019 study of finding a way to build in a more contextual way over time.
All right, great. Thank y'all.
Yeah,
All right.
Harriet, just a quick question.
So this is my husband, David.
Yeah, this is Dave Terabesi. Yeah, just wanted to ask about the height restrictions of the 2019 plan. Contextual. There are several, actually more than several houses on the street there that are indeed higher than 24 feet. So how that's contextual, I don't know, and I would like to challenge the 24-foot height restriction.
Sure. What would probably best, because I am not familiar with your specific property or what street you're on or anything like that.
Around Allison Place.
Okay. If y'all could maybe send us an email with specific questions. I think it's easier to answer specific questions about specific properties one-on-one. But I can look into the height standards for you.
Got it. All right. Yep. Thanks, Phil. I'm going to run back to the written Q&A. So the next question we have was from John O. It says, so formerly due to not having an alleyway, we could not build a detached living unit. Does this mean we can now? So a question I think is about DADUs and alley access. Harriet or Joni, can you answer that?
Yes, that's correct. You can build where you could not before.
Great. Okay. Thanks. Andrew Donchez asked, should a new mixed-use district be created for the Character District 1 transition properties that, sorry, it's cutting off here for me. Transition properties that better aligns the goals of the 2019 planning studies and the current industrial zoning. I'll take that one. Yeah, there could be a possibility for that, but that's not in the scope of this UDO and zone change. It would be a completely different document and zone, quite frankly. Josh Helmer asks, if all our properties become RM20, and again, I want to point out those would be the R6, the residential properties, and they are multifamily eligible, will the permit process be like an HPR, or will it be an engineered plan / commercial process like it is right now? Joni, do you want to take that?
You know, that's a good question that I think actually we can look into and post an answer on the website in coming days, but I think that's a question for codes and how they review building permits, and I don't know that I have an answer to that. So we would be happy to follow up and make sure that that is answered online in the future shortly.
Got it. Thanks. Joshua Baxter asks, why is this proposal being rushed through? The planning department says this is in a very unusual timeline. Since it says what the planning department's saying, Joni, I'll address that to you. Is the planning department saying this is a very unusual timeline?
This is a typical timeline for the Planning Commission's calendar. So the Planning Commission has a set calendar that's published, I think, in October for every calendar year. I think the time frame of it in terms of filing and following the Planning Commission's calendar, following the council calendar is entirely typical. The council member filed, I believe, in October or November. I don't recall the actual deadline off the top of my head. So that calendar is set a year in advance, I believe, and so it's following a typical time frame.
Got it. Thanks. We'll got a few more and then we'll go back to the audio ones. Dwayne Cuthbertson asks, it still appears that all parking pads shall be located in the required rear and side yards. I don't see that you can construct detached buildings or garages in required rear / side yards. So does that mean that garages are not allowed? Harriet or Joni?
I'm not sure I follow that exactly, but no, it is not the intent to prohibit garages. So I will review those standards to make sure that all of that language is clarified and makes sense. So you're definitely not prohibiting garages.
Got it. William Smallman asked, the planning study states that neighborhood centers offer opportunities within the interior of neighborhoods for diverse housing types, goods, and services to provide a local benefit to the neighborhood. Why isn't this addressed in the UDO? Harriet, could you go to the map of the UDO? Because there are a couple neighborhood centers in the UDO, the most prominent of which is on Chestnut Street. So you'll see where those neighborhood centers are. I think they were typically they weren't in yellow. They were like in like a purple. Yeah, it looks like maybe page 5. Harriet, so you see mixed use neighborhood centers are drawn out there. So there's a Chestnut Street one there. And then Harriet, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's still the Hart Street neighborhood center as well, correct? Okay. All right. So there are neighborhood centers in the UDO. There's another question on the garages that I think is very similar to the other one from Dwayne. So Dwayne, Harriet's going to follow up with you on the garage stuff. Eric Melo asked, can you add neighborhood centers? Sorry, Harriet, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Okay.
I was an affirmative. Yeah.
Thanks. Can you add neighborhood centers within the Merritt Southgate and Fall Hamilton character areas? Alternatively, can there be an option for zone changes to MULA within these character areas to allow walkable mixed use options? So from my standpoint, that's probably going to be a conversation since it's purely in Wedgewood-Houston. There is a meeting that SNAP is setting up with myself and members of planning where we could address whether neighborhood centers were appropriate. I can tell you personally from when I was applying for this, I did not view neighborhood centers as appropriate in the Wedgewood-Houston portion of the UDO, primarily because the areas that would have been appropriate have already been redeveloped, and they've been redeveloped as residential. So that was my initial thinking on that. But I think that's going to be more heavily addressed or more directly addressed in the SNAP meeting that's being set up. I'm going to take one more on the written, and then we're going to go back to the voice questions. William Smallman also asks, what is the minimum distance between two detached structures, such as a detached duplex?
I'm sorry, you cut out for a second, Colby. Can you repeat that, please?
Sorry, yeah. What is the minimum distance between two detached structures, such as a detached duplex?
This is a detached duplex. So the minimum distance between two structures that are front to back and detached is 20 feet. There must be 20 feet between the two structures. And then if they are side by side, I don't think there's a standard for that.
Got it. Okay. All right. I'm headed back to the hands, and I'm prioritizing folks who have not yet asked a question. Also, if you have asked a question and you're done, if you'll put your hand down, that way when I sort by who has their hand up, it'll help me out. So Kyle Yates. Wesley, do you mind unmuting Kyle, please? Thanks, Kyle. We should be able to hear you now.
Great. Thanks, Colby. I had a very similar question to the one William Smallman just asked. On the detached structures that are side by side, currently the entitlement is basically 6 feet apart. Harriet, is it safe to assume that that is going to remain the same with the updated 5-foot side setbacks in a typical 50 by 150 lot, separate from the parking? But I had the same question as William, currently entitled to 6 feet between those structures.
So you're asking, will it be 5 on each side and then 6 in between?
That's correct. If we built a side-by-side duplex, where in the in the document on page 13, under the buffer distance, it showed 20 feet. So it was just clarification on to make sure that wasn't going to be 20 feet between a side-by-side detached duplex build.
Yes, you're correct. And I will update that language to make sure that that's clear.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. Going down the list on voice, so Joshua Baxter, and I'm going to point out, hey, Josh Helmer, you've got a check mark next to yours. So if you want to ask a question, just hit it again, see if your hand comes up. If not, that's fine. Okay, perfect. Okay, so if we could unmute Joshua Baxter, and then I'm going to come to you, Josh Helmer. Okay, Joshua, you should be unmuted.
Yeah. First of all, Joni, big kudos to you and you've been very helpful and nice and kind in answering questions. So the first question I have, I'm still unclear, and many people are in the text message that we have going as we're listening, is on a single family home. And I'm the one that asked, if I'm building on Hamilton Avenue, is there still the 24-foot restriction if it's 2 stories? I'm still concerned. I still don't understand where the height restriction is there. Can somebody clarify that first point?
Sorry, you said you're in Merritt Southgate, correct?
Yes, and I'm going to build a house at 610 Hamilton, and it's going to be a single family. So I'm not understanding the wording. Now, what is the height restriction for a single family home?
3 stories.
Okay, but what if it's not 3 stories? What if it's 2 stories?
Then that
I
is
think,
okay.
Yeah, I think there's a mix-up between requirement and maximum. There's not a requirement, there's a maximum. So the maximum would then be 3 stories. Is that accurate, Harriet?
No,
Yes,
no.
that is
So what we had heard before was that the maximum height could be 24 feet, correct? In the initial proposal.
I think I follow what you're asking. Let me see if I can say it another way, in a way that will clarify. So before, in the first draft, it was, I think, limited to 2.5 stories. Is that correct, Harriet? 2.5 stories and 24 feet. So both of those are being erased, and the maximum is 3 stories.
Okay.
So if you are building a 2-story dwelling, it is not limited by a number of feet.
Okay.
It would be compliant because it's only 2 stories and the maximum height is 3 stories.
Perfect. Thank you for clearing that up. Secondly, as you know, there has been an online petition that I'm the one that started, that is over 140 people. And I appreciate the pushback, Colby, the date. Many of us still feel maybe we could give another 30 days. I will say that when talking to people from planning, they have said this is a rush timeline. And it's still out there, and many of us, and I think it's very significant when there's 140, 150 people, would still like some more time to digest. I think what you guys have done today and the adjustments are wonderful, and I commend you on that, because I know this is not an easy process, but I still think there's a hunger in the neighborhood to give us a little more time to digest, especially during this process right now, because many of the terms we're talking about, I simply can't follow. And it would be great to have a fact sheet and review and ask more questions, but I appreciate what you did so far.
Great, thanks. And that's well taken. And I think we're going to be working through a couple of those other, trying to get those things as clear as possible over the next several months. I want to keep going to folks who haven't gotten to do an audio question yet. Josh Helmer, I think you're next on that list. Wesley, if you can unmute him.
Hey, can
Josh,
you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. So I just have kind of a 2-part question as well. So the conversation about the substandard lots will be guaranteed a 2 build under the RM20 zoning. I'm trying to figure out what is the minimum square footage that we are calling substandard, because if substandard of the RM20 is 6,000 square feet, then it just meets the R6A requirements, or R6, and I'm unsure why we're changing it. And then the second part of that question is, so for the RM20 zoning, the increased density that we keep talking about, that is great for developers, which I am one, obviously, for people who want to build and sell more affordable, or build 3 and keep them as rentals. But what about your person who have paid a lot of money for their lots, just want to build a single family home and want to build 3 stories and 40 feet tall, like they've been allowed to in the past, and not try to increase their value by having neighbors in their backyard?
I can address both of those. I'll start with your second question first and say that you are still able to build your 3-story single family home if that's what you want to do. There are no restrictions for that. And most of the standards within the UDO, as we've outlined, are similar to what's currently in the zoning code. So the impervious surface ratio is similar to the current lot coverage, is actually an increase. And the setback standards are also similar. So we really aren't reducing any entitlements in terms of the block of massing, I guess, if that's what you're asking. And then in regards to the substandard lots, I'm not sure I'm exactly following your question, but what I'll say is that especially within Chestnut Hill, there are a lot of lots that are substandard to the current R6 zoning. And so they today would not be able to build 2 units on their lots. And so what we're saying is we're increasing to RM20 A and F, but we're also entitling everyone to a minimum of 2 units. So even if currently under R6, your lot is too small for 2 units, now you'll be able to have a minimum at least of 2 units.
So I think from what we talked about at the beginning, the changes to the Merritt Southgate would allow 3 stories, 35 feet, but it doesn't seem like in Chestnut Hill, these same changes are being made, or did I miss that? Because it seems like in the draft plan that came out, we're talking about, your neighbor's house plus 8 feet, I believe is what it was, maximum 2.5 stories. So is all of that going away and we're keeping the same rules, 3 stories, 35 feet on substandard lots, 45 feet on regular lots? Our zoning is just changing?
Sorry, I misunderstood you. No, you're correct. So for Chestnut Hill and for Fall Hamilton in the 2019 study, there were the recommendations regarding the contextual infill design standards that should be paired with the base zoning. So while a lot of like the setback standards and things like that are similar to the zoning, there are the height restrictions.
So what do we need to do to have that change, just like the Merritt Southgate? Because I'm wondering why the change in that, section 2A and not the rest of this UDO. Like, it doesn't make sense to put height restrictions on certain areas and not the entire overlay.
That goes back to the 2019, to the recommendations of the 2019 study. The recommendations of the 2019 study did not call for those kind of contextual guidelines for Merritt Southgate, because that neighborhood has developed so much already that the kind of larger houses and the taller form is kind of more the standard now in Merritt Southgate. And so it is my understanding from the 2019 study, and Greg can chime in on this, that they did not recommend those kind of contextual standards in that area as they did for Chestnut Hill and for Fall Hamilton.
Okay, and then just to try to clarify what I was asking in that first section on that last question. So what I meant by substandard was, so there's certain lots on Shepherd Street that I've built on and that we still own that are under the 3,750 square feet that we've had to ask for a variance even for a single build in the past. Are we saying now that lots under 3,750 square feet, are eligible for 2, no variances at all?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Josh. I've got two names that have not asked a question yet that are on the audio, so I'm going to go to them. That's Jeffrey and then Ryan. And then I'm going to go back to Q&A. Just a couple of time setting things here. We're slated to go till 5:30. It's 5:08 now. So I'm going to work through as many on the Q&A as I can after these two audio ones. I'm going to prioritize people who haven't asked a question before. All Q&A, just like last time, documented, saved, going to be on the Wedgewood-Houston Chestnut Hill study page. So just want to make sure everybody knows if I don't get to, if you maybe asked a follow-up question or maybe you had a third question, if I don't get to that in our time frame, it will be on the website. It will be in the Q&A. So Wesley, can you unmute Jeffrey if you don't mind? Jeffrey Hammond. Hey, Jeffrey, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Councilman, and thank you, planning staff, for this forum. Very informative. My question is about calculation on the front setback, and understand that that's an average of adjacent homes. And in the presentation here, you talked about striking part of that would allow consideration of properties across the street. And the reason given was that it was less than clear. As I read that on page 17, I think it's reasonably clear. I mean, I can follow what it's saying, and also think that as you go down the street, it makes sense to me that front setback should be consistent on both sides of the street and not just one. So can you talk about why that was struck and what the reasoning there was?
Sure. So your logic definitely matched our original logic. Where we started to get questions was regarding corner lots or places, especially in Chestnut Hill, where you don't have kind of right angles in terms of streets. And so we discussed changing the language to something regarding a common frontage, but then it just seemed, in our conversations with people and trying to parse out the best way to do it, it just seemed to streamline it the most to make it adjacent.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, which is there ever any consideration that if there is alley access, that front setback would be smaller than if there's not alley access? I think for me, it's a question of parking, and if parking's in the front, it makes sense to have a larger setback. If the parking is in the rear off the alley, it makes sense to shift everything up and have a smaller front setback.
Yes, we have not considered that just because normally when we're dealing with setbacks, we're thinking about the kind of public right-of-way and the streetscape experience. But if there, if you have a specific question about your property or things that it might merit a modification, we'd definitely be happy to talk with you about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Jeff. And then Ryan Case, if we can unmute Ryan. Hey, Ryan, we should be able to.
Can y'all hear me?
We got you.
Okay, I appreciate y'all doing this. It's been informative for sure. A question and then a comment. So I'm at 432 Avenue, and so I guess I'm just still a little confused on the 3 stories, 35 feet, all this. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that just under the current zoning, we could build up to 46 feet. And so is that what the main change is? Like, I guess my question is for 432 Wingrove, what is the main height change? So that would be my question. And then sort of in my comment, I think I would probably echo what Josh Baxter said about a delay. I feel like April may be a little quick, and I think we could all benefit maybe from a tad more time to look into and digest some of this. As I read through the plan today, there's a lot of stuff in there, and some I definitely agree with and is good. But there's stuff about the shutters, there's stuff about fencing, there's stuff about a variety of things that just seemed odd to me. And, it just kind of feels like an HOA. If I wanted somebody to tell me how my shutters had to be, I could have lived in places where I do that. So I don't know. Again, I'm not necessarily 100% just against the idea. I understand the sort of intention is definitely a good idea. But I definitely think we could benefit from some more time looking at it. So anyway, that's my comment. And I'll I'm wait for the question about the height.
Hey, Ryan, if I can jump in and kind of address what you were asking about height. So as you probably know, in the UZO, height is limited to 3 stories and 45 feet for single family, and I believe for 2 family also. So I think we have some further clarification to do on these different building types. Now that we're sort of streamlining where height is or how height is measured and whether it's measured by building type or by character area, we need to be more clear on that. So we are going to do that, and you will see that in the updated draft that we're posting tomorrow. So there's less confusion. We can talk maybe back and forth a little bit about each individual's building type if you need to, but otherwise just look for that clarification information at least on the website tomorrow.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. All right, I'm going back to questions in the Q&A box again, prioritizing folks who hadn't asked before. So Michael Murdoch asked, there are existing commercial and MDHA properties on 2nd Avenue South near Lafayette. Have those changed to R6? So what Michael's referring to is the very northern tip, I believe, of the Chestnut Hill UDO, and I think probably maybe the colors are a little hard to distinguish. The short answer is no, they're not going to R6A. Harriet, do you want to chime in as to what they are?
Yes, that's correct. They are not going to R6. They are, it looks like they are core frame and CS, is that core support? And so those uses will remain what they are currently.
Great, thanks. Okay, I am scrolling through just trying to get to folks. I do see, okay, so here we go. So this was a question that a couple people asked. Well, there's 2 parts. It's from somebody who hasn't asked before. Charles McTorry asked, how exactly can I opt out? Question. And then why are you adding NS to commercial properties? So I'm gonna take the second one first. NS meaning, for those who aren't familiar, non-short-term rental, is just apply blanket throughout on this UDO to keep things consistent. If folks want to make that point of discussion, they can. I will add 2 caveats to that. Right now in residential properties, if the R6A properties do not allow new applications for non-owner occupied, right? There's 2 kinds, owner occupied, non-owner occupied. So that's the current. RM, if you rezone to a base RM zoning, then it does open things up to a non-short-term rental. Now that window will close again. Council has passed legislation to say that RM will not allow non-owner occupied starting January 1 of next year, of 2022. So what I've tried not to do is basically open the neighborhood up to an accessory use that has not been open to, quite frankly, for about 18 months now, since the state legislature passed a law that sort of preempted us as a council, but maintains that in residential 1 and 2 family like R6, non-owner occupied is not a permitted use. Now, there's a couple of ways to talk through that. I would want to have this conversation based in the specific neighborhoods about how people feel about commercial properties having that ability. And then also we have a tool, what's called an owner-occupied overlay, that can actually work in tandem with other overlays. So it would allow for that. I'm going to just be real frank with y'all. I get tons of complaints on short-term rental properties in these areas, just a ton. So there is a motivation from my end to say, I'm seeing this as a residential impact, as a neighborhood impact, and it needs to be addressed in some way. I'm open to having that conversation, but just so you know what the origin of that is, that's the origin. Charles' first question is, how exactly can I opt out? I think this has been a point of sort of confusion or contention among folks. We mentioned at the last meeting that overlays tend to be contiguous. As you can see in these, there's a contiguous Wedgewood-Houston and a contiguous Chestnut Hill. What we have really tried to do based on feedback over the last several weeks is stick with those sub-district boundaries as we're in the 2019 study plan. So what I try to do, what planning tries to do, is create a standard, right? A standard that applies to everyone who's within the overlay. There's not really a good way that if you're in the overlay to opt out, because what you would also be doing is opting out of the rezoning. And in as you can see, the vast majority of cases, that would mean you're actually opting into a down zone, and it would create spot zoning all over the neighborhood, even quite frankly more than to the extent it is already. So that's the conversation. When you have an overlay, it's a contiguous overlay. The fact that this is associated with a rezoning makes it sort of even more critical that those pieces stay contiguous. And that's why, in part, you can see where the commercial or those transition areas were removed in order to create a more contiguous, more, I must say, sort of, a boundary that was already established through a study plan. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Let me keep going through folks who I have not seen ask a question before who are in the Q&A box. I think most of the names, okay, I do see Brad Forster, who I don't think I've called him before. So I'm going to try, Brad had two questions. I'm going to try and get to the first one and try to pair the two here. Okay, it's about the same thing. Brad says, please share what is driving the sense of urgency. Dana is correct. 3 weeks is not much of a deferral. Other members of Metro have shared no other UDO has moved anywhere near this quickly. I'll take that one. So again, I'm going to go back to, and I've had some individual conversations about this process as well. Greg kind of outlined how the process got to this point, right? All the way back from Nashville Next in 2015 to now. We have adjusted the timeline to incorporate more community meetings. I think we've gotten a pretty good amount of feedback based on some of the Q&A so far. I've been a part of 3 overlay processes in the time that I've been in the council. They have all been conservation overlays, which are more restrictive, and they sure did not have an upzoning associated with them. They kept all the base zoning and overlaid what's called a neighborhood conservation zoning overlay. In those processes, I can tell you that the first one I came into was Waverly Belmont. I came into office in September. That was passed basically on the same timeline, around December, January. In fact, it was December. We had several community meetings in person. Unfortunately, we can't do that now, but just like this. And it had been the result of years of neighborhood conversation before, just like this year's of neighborhood conversation have occurred. Conservation overlay, it didn't start that way. It started as, what can we do to ensure the houses don't get torn down? That was the priority in that area. Same deal with an extension of the Belmont Hillsborough conservation overlay over near Clayton Avenue. We had a similar timeline. And then the most recent one was the Edge Hill neighborhood conservation zoning overlay, which is following almost exactly this same timeline and process regarding when the legislation was introduced, the conversations that occurred in the neighborhood beforehand about what people wanted the neighborhood to be, and then kind of how it stepped through that process. So I do want to be really clear with people, like there is an opportunity to have the discussion about the timeline. The reason we put the timeline up the way we did is to show, like, there are many months of conversations and meetings to come. But this is not unusual in the overlay processes that I've taken part of myself as a district council member, and that I've witnessed through other council members who've brought forward similar overlays. I do want to stress this type of UDO with an upzoning is unique in the sense that overlays tend to go on without an increase in entitlements. This has an increase in entitlements. It's something I don't want to get lost, because that is I would say benefit, but that is a unique aspect to this that you do not see in other overlay processes. There was a somewhat similar one done 25 years ago with the South Music Row conservation overlay, where basically what was already happening on Music Row was allowed to continue to happen. It just required a zone change. but nothing that enabled this level of entitlement increase. Just plain and simple. And I think you've heard some of that tonight regarding what substandard lots are allowed for. Just saying like flat out, everyone is entitled to at least 2 dwelling units. I'm going through, thanks to Joshua for the nice comments to Joni. There were a couple of questions, clarifying questions for NS. Does the NS allow owner-occupied permits? No. NS does not allow owner-occupied permits. 2 caveats to that. If you already have a permit, owner-occupied or non-owner-occupied, it gets grandfathered in. So if you are a current short-term rental permit holder, this does not change anything regarding your permit. The second piece that I'll bring up is what I mentioned earlier. There is a tool that was just created about 4 months ago, if that, called an owner-occupied overlay that can work in tandem with this. Again, what I want to do is have that conversation in our subsequent meetings and get a sense for what neighborhoods want to see on that. It may be that one neighborhood wants it and one neighborhood doesn't. It may be that part of one neighborhood wants it and one neighborhood doesn't. We can have those discussions, but I just want to make sure that people know what the tools are that are available. The owner-occupied overlay is a very new tool, and I just want to make sure people are aware of it. And then there's somebody here, and one more on that. Wes Gray asks, can you be clear about whether an owner-occupied short-term rental permit will be allowed in RM20A NS? No, a new owner-occupied short-term rental permit would not be allowed in RM20A NS. If you currently have an owner-occupied short-term rental permit, or if you go and obtain one before this UDO goes into effect, before the pending legislation took place, you are grandfathered in. So just trying to make that clear. And I know it can be complicated. We've got 5 minutes till the end of the meeting. I'm trying to go through just to make sure I haven't missed anyone who hasn't asked a question already. I do see, as I go back to the voices, I see Brian who's on, who has not yet asked a question on the audio side. Wesley, could you unmute Brian, please?
Hey, Colby, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Real briefly, if someone wanted to apply and request their property be considered for a mixed-use neighborhood center, is that something they can apply to have that considered, or would they just have to go through a straight rezoning like an SP or something of that nature?
I'm gonna verify this with planning. I think the technical answer would be both. I think the practical answer would be the first one. Harriet, do you or Joni have anything to add on that?
I'll ask Joni to speak to that.
Hey, y'all, I'm sorry. I was typing a response to somebody in the Q&A. Could you repeat that question? I apologize.
I'm asking on a specific property that's on Hamilton Avenue that currently has a lot of trailers that are on it. And I'm wanting to know if that person wants to apply to have that property considered for a mixed-use neighborhood center, if they could do so, or would they just have to go through the route of a rezone?
Okay, I follow what you're saying. Okay, I think there are two, let me take one step back and talk about the policy. So the policy does support neighborhood centers, or it discusses neighborhood centers in this area. The council member is the person who takes zone changes forward. So part of this would be in his purview in terms of zone changes. There are standards in the UDO for neighborhood centers. So if a property were rezoned to something commercial for its underlying zoning, a neighborhood center standards of the UDO could be applied to it. But again, it would have to go through the rezoning process, whether with this project or sometime in the future, should the owner decide to do that. And that would be shepherded through by the council member. Okay.
You guys are doing a great job. This has been very informative as well. I just wanted to make that comment.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
I'm going to take one last question in the Q&A box because it's sort of tangential to what we've talked about, but hasn't been I think probably directly address. So Josh Helmer asked, if the timeline can't be changed, can language be added to say permits can be pulled up until the day this is 100% complete and official? So the short answer to that is yes. So something can be written into the legislation. That's why I wanted to make really clear that filing on first reading, anything can be amended or substituted, and almost always happens on bills like this during the process. So yes, there is the opportunity to write in what we call a date certain, or an enactment date, or an enforcement date, whatever you want to call it. So yes, that's possible. That is, again, something I want us to keep talking through over the next couple of meetings. And we have that opportunity. We have that time because the Planning Commission date is going to be pushed to February 11th. And then one last thing, Charles McTorry has asked about OR 20 changes, about basically that zoning changing from OR to OR 20A and S, and is that essentially a down zone? Is Harriet, do you or Joni, do you want to address that?
I don't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Harriet. You go ahead.
Oh, no. All I was going to say is the use is the same. A in the zone code refers to an alternative zoning district, and it is not a down zone. It just has specific standards within the zoning code for a more urban type neighborhood. And then the NF refers to the no short-term rental.
Yeah, and I come across this conversation all the time, and I'll end it on this because we're right at 5:30. I come across this conversation all the time regarding short-term rentals as an entitlement. Short-term rentals are an accessory use under the code, so they're not baked into the zoning code, and so it's a tough conversation to have, and that's why I want us to have that conversation again, sort of within the next few meetings, to say what is the priority of the neighborhoods when it comes to this, because the framework and groundwork for short-term rentals, the legislative and policy framework has changed and continues to change, and has changed over the last 5 years. So I just want to make that clear, but also want to acknowledge that, sure, I understand that may be a sticking point for some folks in this conversation. I want to have that conversation moving forward. All right, we're at 5:31. I want to really thank everyone for participating and hanging with us. At one point, I think we had 115 people on this call. We've still got 72, so thank you all for going through this. Harriet, would you mind putting up the timeline one last time for folks, as I remind you, all these documents, all the recordings, everything goes up to WHCHstudy.nashville.gov. Sometimes the redirect gets a little weird depending on what browser you're in, but that's the URL that redirects. If you search this study plan and this UDO, it'll come up. Again, the 21st is being deferred. The Planning Commission hearing is being deferred to February 11th. So you'll still see the signs out around the neighborhood, but it is being deferred to February 11th. We're going to have our next meeting. That meeting is also at 4 p.m. So January 26th, which is 2 weeks from today, it's a Tuesday, January 26th, 4 p.m. We will send out the link, just like last time, to everyone who's attended. It'll be posted publicly. Everyone share it. It'll have the same parameters as we did this time, and we'll continue to refine the process if needed. And then this timeline will also be posted on the site. In fact, I think it may already be updated. So thank you again, everyone. We're going to continue to have this conversation. I really appreciate all the feedback everyone's given, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you to planning and to ITS for all of your work. So have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.